I remember the moment well. I was sitting in the boardroom of the music industry. I was the chairman of the music industry, and all of my people were around. I was only 27 years old. I was the youngest ever chairman, and I had the chief exec of EMI Records, the chief exec of Sony, the chief exec of all these huge labels. And it was 2000. I was elected in 99, got in 2000, and I was told that we had a big problem in the music industry. And then they showed me a picture of a cat and said, this will end the industry. And so we looked at the cat and thought, what is going on here? And found out that they meant Napster, the file streaming music sharing service. So my lovely committee members decided that something had to be done. So we hired a consultant to come in and tell us how to stop file sharing on the internet. So the first consultant came in, and we paid them $30,000. They came in, and the consultant said, there's nothing you can do about it. And so we fired the consultant, obviously. We got another consultant who came in, paid them $50,000. And my committee member said, tell us how we can stop file sharing. I mean, you've got to remember, back then, the music industry was so big, we were expensing Porsches, we were working for 2 days and then partying for 29 days. It was a great time. So the next consultant comes in, my committee members briefed this person and said, listen, you cannot tell us there's nothing we can do. You've got to give us some kind of solution. So the consultant suggested that we take the chief exec of the internet to court and file a motion for them to stop allowing people to share music online. Now, we didn't know who the chief exec of the internet was. And I had just sold a company to Apple 2 years before, so I kind of suspected that there wasn't a chief exec of the internet. But no, the committee were certain they will find the chief exec of the internet, and he or she will stop being naughty. So the consultant gave us a fax number, if anyone remembers faxes. Yeah. I still don't know how they work. Anyway, we got a fax number. Here's a French fax number. And so our committee then sent a 164-page cease and desist letter, which basically means stop what you're doing. A 164-page fax to the chief exec of the internet on this French fax number. 6 years later, I'm in a totally different role in my life. I'm running a TV company, and I go down to see Publicis, the French advertising agency. Anyone here from Publicis? Okay, good. In which case, I went to the French advertising agency, and I was invited by Dominique to meet the chief exec. And I said, that's great. Who's the chief exec? A guy called Alexander. I was like, fantastic. And Dominique said, you can wait in Cafe 164 downstairs. I said, no problem. Came downstairs, and I said, Dominique, why is it called Cafe 164? And she said, well, you won't believe this, but about 6 years ago, our chief exec got a 164-page fax from the music industry asking him to stop file sharing. So we laughed so much that we took every single page of the fax and we put it on a panel around the wall. And that's why it's called 164. And I said, who would have done that? Who would send a fax? And it's an interesting moment of my life because I realized that everything that happened since then, the 93% reduction in the music industry revenues, everything that's happened since then is not actually about digital or Spotify or Napster or any of the other services. It's actually about how the music industry thought, how they processed thinking. It's actually about how the thoughts are structured. It's not to do with what Google do or what Facebook do. It's not to do with what Amazon are planning or what Elon Musk is thinking. It's actually around how we think that changes the future. How we think, and it's so powerful. In fact, the body doesn't actually know the difference between an experience and the thought of an experience. The body reacts in the same way. If we think of something in a positive way and a healthy way, it turns out our body, on a cellular level, actually changes. The study of epigenetics from Joe Dispenza to anyone, in fact, is fascinating. And then we have Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, and my hero, who has often said in his writings, from Man's Search for Meaning, and in fact even the summary of his thoughts inside a book called Prisoners of Our Thoughts, that our thinking is actually where the present turns into whatever future we want. And looking at it from a business perspective, I spoke to the brilliantly named Institute of Restructuring and Insolvency Advisors, and they did this piece of research. And they found out that out of 3,000 companies that go wrong, out of 3,000, large and small, 52% of those business failures are caused by internal triggers that happen inside the boardroom, i.e., how we think. Inside the company, nothing to do with competitors at all. Half of the time things go wrong. There was nothing to do with the outside world. It happened inside our boardroom, inside our heads, how we thought about something. Then 15% started outside and then came inside. 24% is a combination of both. 8% is nothing to do with us. We couldn't have helped it. And then 1% is bad luck. You know what this actually means? 91% of the time, it's on us. It's not what happens outside our buildings only, or even in combination. It's how we process that. And I've been thinking about that for quite a while in my life. In fact, if we think about what success looks like, we tend to actually become less responsive to change over time. The volume of our response tends to go down. We get more cash rich, we get more successful, we get more customers, so we tend to respond slower to change. Whereas actually we know, and from all the speakers today you've heard, you know that the rate of change is the slowest it will ever be. So this kind of causes a problem. Our response goes down, change goes up. So I've come to the conclusion that success is actually about how well we change, and failure is how much we don't. And if I were to simplify that even more, I would say that every single thing that we think has an impact on our destiny. You can link the top left to the bottom right. But we spend so much time thinking about our diet and nutrition. It's good. Our physical exercise, great. Our friend network, great. The funny pictures on Facebook, great. The Netflix series to download, great. But how much time do we think about thinking? Training our thoughts as muscles. Our thought muscle. Let's put it into practice. So, we know that times have changed. We're evolving as a species, obviously. We're getting even better at communicating. The innovation, the amazing digital innovation that we see throughout the world has enabled people to have relationships in different ways. The way that we live is changing. The way that we can build communities. The way that we transport ourselves around the world is changing. The way that we can understand the human body is changing. The way that we visualize anything is changing. If we think about how we're connected, the Internet of Things will fundamentally change our view of what connectivity really means, with 30 billion devices in the next decade. How we think about healthcare is changing. If we move from just the impact on our cells from our thoughts into what we can do with magnets, bearing in mind all of our neurology in our brain, is actually a magnetic circuit. The ability for us to actually manipulate bad thoughts out is huge. And then you've got the under-skin sensors, the transmitters and sensors from a company like Proteus Digital Health. And then all of this will be supercharged by the next wave of computing, where things aren't binary, 1 and 0. Things are multiple states all at once, and only there when they're observed and not there when they're not observed. Everything I've said requires us to think about these things in one way or another, but how we think about it is going to be more important than what happens. We can not believe in quantum computing as much as we like. We can not believe that 3D printing is going to change manufacturing. No problem. But how we think is going to be the difference between success and failure. Now, throughout my life, I've spent 30 years traveling the world talking to people and with people about how we think. And most of the reactions that I've had have been, let's say, less than positive. And it's been strange over 3 decades watching the way that the world has changed. Because if you can imagine that feeling of watching I don't know, let me think if I can find a good visual example. It's like if you can imagine, you know something is going to happen. I don't know if you can visualize this type of thing. I'm trying to find the right words. You can see that it's definitely going to happen. Everyone else can see that it's going to happen. And eventually it gets so frustrating, you just want it to happen. You see, I think that the best summary is that you can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. If I were to summarize my opportunity thinking, like how I think about opportunity for companies, especially in the media world, I would say this. The business we think we're in isn't really the business we're truly in if we elevate our perspective. If we lift our view up from content marketing or website development or CRM software, if we lift our view up to an elevated perspective, there's no companies there. Harley-Davidson doesn't need to compete with motorcycles because it's in the business of enabling slightly overweight middle-aged men to experience freedom. That means they can compete in multiple ways. They can have a leather jacket brand, a skateboard brand, a whiskey brand. Wonder Bra, the lingerie company, aren't in the business of lingerie. They're in the business of enabling self-confidence. When you elevate your perspective, the competitive advantage is huge to the business you're truly in, because the volume of companies isn't there. Our ability to innovate is directly proportional to our ability to elevate. So when Kodak looked at the camera phone and laughed, Fujifilm, their competitor, elevated their perspective. And the work that I did with them was to say, what business are we really, really in? And they're like, oh, photography. No, stop. Okay, printing paper and images? No, stop. Higher. And we realized that Fuji are actually in the business of how light damages material. Photography. So that's why Fujifilm then went on to launch the world's largest and most profitable anti-wrinkle skincare cream brand called Astalift. Because the largest source of light is the sun, and the largest source of material is skin. They have a 300-year business plan that is only risked by the sun running out or skin running out. Or any other material. Fujifilm can get involved in how houses can be damaged by the sun. Fujifilm can get involved in how pavements and street corners and anything that's made of material is damaged by anything that gives off light. That, my friends, that is what elevation looks like. Their ability to innovate beats any company in that industry, in any of the industries they're in. But then we have a paradox. We have a challenge with that. Because how are we supposed to continue exploiting what we do while we're exploring what we could be doing? How do we balance the paradox of exploitation versus exploration? It's kind of like having an oil tanker that moves really slowly and needing to have a speedboat that also goes really fast. So we have a really fast speedboat and we have our oil tanker that moves slow. The speedboat can sense what's on the horizon and report back to the oil tanker that can only move 1% per year. But you know what happens? What happens is that companies who tend to be oil tankers tend to try and run over the speedboat because a speedboat on your profit and loss accounts looks like a cost. It doesn't really produce huge, great big revenues because it's only a speedboat. So we think, we can get rid of it. We think this isn't profitable, therefore we should get rid of it. And in fact, that I've observed over the years means that I think we need another ROI. So ROI, meaning return on investment, needs to have a twin sister. And that twin sister, an alternative ROI, if you like, I would say is this: risk of inaction. We spend so much time plotting how much return on investment we're going to get, and so little time plotting what would happen if we don't do anything. One of the most effective ways I've been able to impact the thinking of some of the world's greatest leaders has been not from showing them how they can double their revenue, but by showing them what happens if they don't do anything. Or if they just do the same thing again and again and again and expect a different result, which is the definition of insanity. But because so many companies are like that, the good news is that there's a lot of mess in the market. There's mess everywhere. Every industry is covered in mess. I still do not know why in one country in the world I can walk into a hotel and I walk up to the desk and I've automatically been checked in, whereas in all the other countries in the world, I walk up to the desk and then fill in 3 pieces of paper. I don't know why in some countries I need to walk to a hotel door and pull out a piece of plastic which has less technology than my phone that I have in my hand that contains all my information and is less easy to be read and duped by the cleaning staff as the key. I don't get it. I don't get why in restrooms, bathrooms, we go to the bathroom, we wash our hands, use a soap, wash our hands, dry our hands, go to the toilet door, the door of the bathroom, touch the handle, even though 68% of people don't wash their hands, even though we touch the door handle and put all of the germs we've washed back onto our hands. I have met one company in the world that provides door handles that have antibacterial gel on them. One company. And there are 37 trillion door handles in the world. Just pointing out a minor market opportunity. Spreading seeds, just giving free of charge advice, yeah. Or your money back. Ultimately, what I'm saying is when there's a mess, there's a market. If you're in an industry that you can see there's a mess, if you have to, every time you use a piece of software, put in your information again and again, and then upload your information, and then you go offline by mistake, so then the upload cancels, and then you do it again. That's a mess. Today, in the last 7 or 8 hours that you've been awake, you have actually tolerated, I predict, dozens of messes. Dozens. Every mess you see is a marketplace that no one has bothered to clear up. And so people go, oh, it's so hard to find new ideas. I'm like, okay, tell me the last frustrating experience you had on the underground system in New York. Tell me the last frustrating experience you had with cloud storage. Tell me the last frustrating experience you had with an advertising campaign. Tell me the last frustrating experience you had getting your car filled up with fuel. Every single frustrating moment in your life is a mess. And there's a market, and the reason it's not attacked, a given focus, is because we just tolerate. We tolerate it. The only reason iTunes worked, and I had a hand in some of the stuff in the background with Apple, the reason it worked when it worked was because no one had actually put together a system that was easy enough. It was quite straightforward. We decriminalized file sharing after trying to sue the internet chief exec, of course. So, if we look at how to address our mess that's a market, I would suggest we start with the most simple mess, something that is really, really simple. And then what we do is we use existing solutions to fix the mess. We then keep the solutions super simple. And finally, point 4 is don't make more mess. If you're thinking about what to do next in your company, if you want to increase your revenue, attract more shareholders, the answer will not be do what your competitors are doing slightly better. The answers will be fix a mess that's really, really, really messy. But then I look at companies and how they're structured and think, why don't people do this? Why don't people act faster? And I've realized that sometimes it's because companies are structured in a way they can't. I mean, this is pretty much the most popular company structure that I've ever seen. I won't mention the mobile network name, but is anyone here from Telefonica? Okay, so there was this mobile network that I can't say the name of, and I met someone who introduced himself as the VP of No. Actually introduced. Hi, I'm Simon. I'm the VP of No. And I then went to the chief exec and I said, so you've got a VP of No? And the chief exec said, yeah. He's our head of innovation. I was like, call my stockbroker, sell all shares in Telefonica. Anyway. But isn't that strange how we operate in a way that won't allow us to be a tanker and a speedboat? It won't allow us to think positively about the rate of change. We structure it. Why do we structure things in that way? Well, looking deeper into the rabbit hole, I've realized that some part of it's fear. And please join. You've missed nothing, I swear. If you're coming to the party later, I'm going to do the whole thing again in Slovenian. So, actually, you know what? These two ladies here, the first two are going to get my special prizes for coming in late. Everything I've said is in here. There you go. So you haven't missed anything. There's big pictures. There's only one word per page, so it takes about 3 minutes to read. Okay, so you do that. Okay, good. Right. Sorry. Still with me? Good. So you get special prizes. If you misbehave, you get a special prize. I can't give another one. Now everyone's just going to leave and come back in again. All right. So one of the things I've observed is that companies are fearful. They're fearful. They don't know what's going to happen. And actually, most of that fear is based on a lack of understanding. The ability to understand more tends to reduce the fear unless it's irrational. Like, for instance, my journey here, from London to Munich to Trieste to here. The plane journey from Munich to Trieste, the guy next to me held my leg the whole time. Obviously, totally fearful of air travel. So at the end, I kind of went into my mindset, motivating kind of thing. I said, you know what you don't realize? Air travel is the safest form of travel. It's more dangerous to drive to the airport than to be on the plane. And he just kept looking at me, and I'm like, you just don't have to worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. And he goes, I'm not scared of air travel. Yeah, anyway. I don't know if anyone can give me any advice on that. So, but when it's rational fear, when it's really rational fear, by the way, have you noticed that I keep touching this? Here's a mess, right? These Madonna mics are really, really bloody uncomfortable. But here's an innovation. I think that if a speaker is going over time, these mics should get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until the speaker just falls off. That's what I think. Anyway, so then there's people who like staying in the comfort zone. They like staying in the comfort zone. It's nowhere near where the magic happens, but they like staying in the comfort zone. But ultimately, the main reason why companies are structured badly is because we like to have low speculation. We like to have high fact. We want to be certain with loads and loads and loads of time. And the only way of getting to the top right-hand side is to start at the bottom left. The way that it works is the more you speculate, the more you can then move to experimentation. And then, only then can you predict. And then it becomes facts. But so many companies say, and you must have heard this in your profession, you must have heard a stakeholder, shareholder, senior executive, or maybe a colleague, whatever, say to you, well, what's your use case? What's your business case? What's the business case? Well, actually, we haven't done this before. Oh, sorry. So you're telling me that we haven't done this and you want to invest into this? Yeah, it's called innovation. But okay, well, show me a competitor that's done it then. Okay, right. Here's 2 competitors that have done it, and then the leader says, well, it's too late. Or you go away, you can't find a competitor who's done it, and you come back saying, we can't find anyone else who's done it. And the leader goes, well, there's no proof. So if you want, do take a picture of this slide and use it. Use it if you want. Because the argument is simple. If you want to predict or get facts, you have to speculate and experiment. You have to test, learn, and improve. And test, and learn, and improve. And test, and learn, and improve. You have to do that to get to the predictions, to get to the facts. But then the question is, why? Why would we bother doing all this stuff? Can we just stick to our easy job and carry on doing what we've always done? Kind of like sit in our comfort zone forever. Well, it depends on what you stand for. So once you know what you stand for, you won't fall for anything. I have a grid of 9 things that I stand for, all based around one central thing. So there's 8 around the middle, around the edge, and then 1 in the middle. It's this. When you establish what you stand for, You can understand why you do anything you want. And you can then work out whether what you're doing fits who you are. In fact, the reason I'm so pro-mindfulness is because it enables me to realize how grateful I am for life and my health. That enables me to accept other people in their journeys whilst I go on adventures around the world. I run a lot on intuition and gut feeling, and it enables me to evolve, and through that evolution, realize my freedom to be as peaceful as I can be. What's your grid? Without the grid, how would we know what we're doing things for? But in closing, I would say this. There's one critical factor that we need to even try and succeed with. One critical factor. And to take us on a journey to that one critical factor that I will close with, I want to show you a theory of army formation from a long time ago by a guy called Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckert. I don't know whether that translates in sign language. So Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckert, theory of army formation, he said this: people who are lazy or stupid, or lazy and stupid, should be the troops going into war. People who are diligent and clever should be administrators. People who are lazy and clever should be leaders. This went down really badly at the New York Stock Exchange Leadership Conference last week. But not as badly as this whole chart went down at the US Naval Base keynote that I gave. And the people who are diligent and stupid, you just have to avoid. Okay. Fair. So I've been thinking about that in terms of how companies are formed. And so I have a theory of company personality. And remember, what I'm talking about here is what I think the one thing is that we need. One thing. So I've realized that people either have skill and will, skill or no will and no skill, or a combination of the both. The people with will and skill should lead. And if they're not given permission to lead, they leave. And then they join a competitor where they lead. Always. People who have the will but no skill, and at the HR conference in Budapest recently, I had to actually change it from no skill to less skill. And then I changed it back again just before I went on stage. So, people who have no skill and will should learn. And if you don't give them permission to learn, then they leave. And then they join a competitor where they learn to lead. Always. Was that an applause? I swear, honestly, I'm going to call my mum. I told you, Mum, 30 years it took, but someone did applaud during my... What? Don't. Okay, I will be giving out the rest of my books. All right, so next up, there are people who have no will and no skill. Now, because I like the L, I have leaders and learners. These people were called losers. But in the same HR conference, I found out I'm not allowed to call them losers. These are challenges. But nonetheless, so we have people with no will but skill who are potentials. Because it turns out that if people don't have the will, it's because the thing inside the company isn't resonating with them. They're not resonating. The purpose isn't resonating with them. They're unable to think positively because there's no resonant purpose. And I genuinely believe that even if you don't have the skill that's required, as we look at the new technologies, the new landscape of change, regardless of what names we use for it, whether it's a mobile, data, big or little, it makes no difference. It's about actually how we think about it. And how we think about it is a choice, and therefore, the choice comes from our will to try, our will to experiment, our will to learn, our will to lead. Because with the will to succeed we will. Thank you.